So for example, you can see on the screen, this is Meta's policy on child exploitation, which the state's lawyer talked about a bit. It's on Meta's website. It says, we do not allow content or activity that sexually exploits or endangers children. You can see right here, it is the policy of the company. The next one is the policy on suicide. That policy is, we do not allow people to intentionally or unintentionally celebrate or promote suicide, self-injury, or eating disorders. Now, the state says that these policies are false because some exploitation and suicide material gets around Meta's safeguards. But Meta's statements are absolutely true. Meta's policy is not to allow this type of content. And Meta tells the world what the policies are so that everybody knows the rules. Meta doesn't want this bad content on its apps. Meta tries hard to get rid of it. And critically, as we'll go through in a minute, Meta publicly admits to the whole world that some of this content gets past its safeguards. It doesn't hide that fact at all. So I want to give you an analogy to explain why we think the state's argument is wrong here. I have up on the screen the Albuquerque Public School policy on bullying. It says that Albuquerque schools strictly prohibit bullying. But of course, everyone knows that kids bully kids at school. Does that mean the state was lying to parents when it said its policy strictly prohibits bullying? Of course not. It just means some kids break the rules. It's the same for Facebook and Instagram. Meta has posted the policies, and unfortunately, some people break the rules. Now, as I said before, it's very important to know that this case is not about whether Meta does a good enough job of getting rid of the bad content. This case is about whether Meta knowingly misled people about that. And Meta did not mislead anyone. Meta warns the world that bad content gets through its safeguards. So I have up on the screen the disclosures that people get when they sign up for Instagram. And Meta's disclosures about these risks start right when you sign up. When you sign up, you have to agree to the terms of use, and the terms include the disclosures on the screen. On Instagram, the sign-up disclosure warns that Meta can't guarantee Instagram will be safe. Meta can't control what people post, and you might see objectionable and even unlawful content. It's similar for Facebook. That's the Facebook one up there. So if you are a parent or a teen or anyone else, from the get-go, you are warned that there are risks from using Facebook and Instagram. That's disclosure, not deception. Now, on top of the sign-up disclosures, Meta has told the public again and again that its safeguards cannot be perfect. I will give you just a few examples, and there are many more than this. In 2018, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, publicly said, quote, "These are not problems you fix, but issues where you continually improve. Our community will also always face its share of abuse. While we will never be perfect, we expect to continue improving." He also said, quote, "We won't prevent all mistakes or abuse, but we currently make too many errors enforcing our policies and preventing misuse of our tools." The same year, Monica Bickert, who you will hear testify, publicly stated, "Our enforcement is not perfect." You're going to hear from Ms. Bickert. She's Meta's head of global policy management. And before she joined Meta, she worked at the United States Department of Justice for more than a decade, prosecuting criminals as a federal prosecutor. She now works at Meta. Another disclosure, Alex Schultz, Meta's chief marketing officer, publicly explained years ago, quote, "We do make mistakes because we didn't remove content that we should have. Any mistake can hurt real people, and that motivates us to do better." Also, Meta publicly talked about its suicide prevention tools and disclosed that this system is, quote, "not 100% effective in identifying every post truly expressing suicidal ideas." The bottom line is Meta told the public over and over again that its enforcement is not perfect and that some bad content gets through its safeguards and can hurt real people. That's disclosure, not deception. Meta even tells the public how many times it estimates people view bad content that gets around its safeguards. Every 3 months, Meta publishes what are called transparency reports that tell the entire world an estimate of how many times people saw content that violated Meta's rules, the amount of content that Meta removes, the amount of content Meta proactively detected using its automated tools before people reported it. These transparency reports are easy to find on Meta's website. Anyone can go look at them. I want to show you a couple of examples so you can understand how transparent Meta is about this. So up on the screen is from the latest transparency report. This is the information Meta discloses about its suicide, self-injury, and eating disorder policies. Meta told the public that 5 out of every 10,000 views on Instagram are of content that violates Meta's rules about suicide, self-injury, and eating disorders. Meta also told the public that it removed 10 million pieces of suicide, self-injury, and eating disorder content on Instagram from July to September 2025. Meta also told the public that it automatically removed 99% of that content before anyone actually reported it. Meta also told the public that 1% of those pieces of content were viewed and reported by users before it was removed. So Meta discloses to the world that there are millions of pieces of suicide and eating disorder content on Instagram. Meta did not hide that at all. The evidence will show that Meta discloses similar information for more than 10 policy areas, like child sexual exploitation, violent and graphic content, bullying and harassment, and drugs and guns. Now think about how transparent that is for a minute. Does your local grocery store tell you how many bad apples were in the store last week? Of course not. Does your local school tell you how many times students were bullied in the last month? No. Meta goes above and beyond to be incredibly transparent. That is disclosure, not deception. Now, the state's lawyer attacked these transparency reports, he called them Caesars, by relying on one survey from years ago called BEEF. You might remember him talking about the BEEF survey. The evidence will show that the state is completely wrong about the BEEF survey. BEEF measured how much bad content people felt like they saw on Meta's apps, not how much content is actually on the apps that actually breaks Meta's rules. They're apples and oranges. Meta's transparency reports are more accurate than BEEF because they show how much content Meta actually removes for breaking its specific policies. By contrast, BEEF only shows how much bad content people thought they saw. So let me give you an example. Some people might think a picture of a woman in a bikini or a man in a Speedo is inappropriate, and they might feel like that's a bad thing. So on the BEEF survey, they'd say that's bad. But that doesn't violate Meta's policies, and so it wouldn't count in the transparency reports. Let me give you an analogy. I was busy, but I heard we had a football game last night. And the referees called penalties when the teams break the rules. You can count up exactly how many penalties the refs called in the football game. That's like the transparency report. It's objective, it's precise. The BEEF survey is more like if you ask the fans after the game how it made them feel. And if you happen to be a Patriots fan, my apology, but you might have felt bad about the result, and you might have felt like the refs didn't call enough penalties on the Seahawks. That's more like the BEEF survey. So Meta's transparency reports are much more accurate in showing bad content on the apps that violates Meta's rules than the BEEF survey. That's disclosure, not deception. Now, as I told you, it's really important to understand that Meta doesn't post any of this content that we're talking about. Those pictures you saw, Meta obviously didn't post any of that stuff. And Meta tries really hard to get rid of it. And I want to describe some of those efforts. I don't have time, obviously, to describe them all, but I do want to describe a few. So first, Meta has built cutting-edge technology to scan Facebook and Instagram for bad content. This includes automated tools that are getting better and better at identifying stuff like suicide and child exploitation content. And I want to give you one example. Meta actually invented photo and video matching tools designed to find pictures of child exploitation so Meta can delete them and report them to law enforcement. Meta actually gave this technology away for free to other tech companies so that they could also use it to help get rid of this gross content. Because this stuff is disturbing. And the problem is that these criminals who use this content and trade it, they go to all the different apps and they do it there. So Meta invented this fancy technology and gave it away for free to the other apps to help catch the bad guys. Second, as I mentioned before, Meta has those 40,000 people who work on protecting safety and security, enough to sell out University Stadium. This includes former law enforcement personnel and child safety experts who Meta has hired to help protect kids on the app. It also includes thousands of people reviewing content to decide whether it breaks Meta's rules or the law. If the reviewers find content that breaks the rules, they remove it. If the content is illegal, like child exploitation, they report it to law enforcement. The reviewers undergo extensive training to understand Meta's policies and how to enforce them. And Meta is constantly looking for ways to make its automated systems better and better. I'm sure you've all heard about AI. AI is getting better and better, and that can help make this review of Facebook and Instagram better and more accurate. You know, you heard the state say that 2.4% of Meta's revenues are used for this stuff, and that is not accurate, and you will see evidence in this trial that that is not accurate. Third, Meta builds tools to protect teens and to allow parents and guardians to protect their kids. One example I want to talk about is called Teen Accounts. Teen Accounts are a package of tools that automatically apply to teens who sign up for Instagram and Facebook. And there are 3 categories of tools inside of Teen Accounts that we're going to talk about through the afternoon. There are tools to limit the kind of content that teens can see. There are tools to limit the kind of people that teens can interact with. And there are tools to limit the amount of time teens spend on the apps. I'm going to talk about each of those during the afternoon. Meta actually worked with parents and teens and got their feedback in order to build these Teen Accounts. Meta knows that parents are busy providing for their families and working, and some are single parents. Some are working multiple jobs, and they're doing their best to watch after their kids. And Meta knows that some parents might not have time to monitor their kids 24/7, especially online. So instead of having dozens of separate tools across Instagram and Facebook, Meta packaged all those tools into one place called the Teen Accounts. And this is a really important point. Meta also set the Teen Account protections to apply automatically. So even if a parent does not have time to set up supervision inside the app, the protections will still apply. And we're going to talk about that. Meta also publicized Teen Accounts so that parents would know about them and how to use them. Meta bought ads in the newspaper. You can see an ad on the left there in the Wall Street Journal. Meta advertised Teen Accounts to parents inside of Instagram. You can see it there. Meta also wrote a parent's guide to help educate parents about the safety features on its apps. It's available for free online for any parent who wants more information. During this trial, you will hear from Syed Otaru. He's Director of Product Management for Well-Being at Instagram. His job is to focus on well-being. He will explain the development of Teen Accounts. He will testify that Meta built Teen Accounts even though it knew, and this is important, even though Meta knew that it would reduce teens' daily use of Instagram by 3.3%. Now that might sound small, but it actually is huge in this business. But Meta rolled out Teen Accounts anyway, knowing that it would have teens' use of Instagram go down. Mr. Otaru will also testify that the Teen Accounts work. Teen Account protections automatically apply to everyone who Meta identifies as being between 13, and 17 years old. If teens under 16 want to make the settings less protective, they need permission from a parent or guardian. And about 97% of teens do not change the automatic protections provided by teen accounts. Meta does even more than offer tools to protect teens. Meta proactively partners with law enforcement to protect people in the real world. For example, Meta works with law enforcement to protect children from exploitation. You will hear testimony from Ravi Sinha, who is sitting right here at council table. Mr. Sinha, before he joined Meta, he worked as a federal prosecutor for 9 years, including prosecuting child exploitation and sex trafficking crimes in federal court right here in New Mexico, where he was born and raised. He's a native New Mexican. Meta hired Mr. Sinha about 6 years ago to help with child safety. He is now head of child safety policy at Meta. Mr. Sinha will testify about the work that Meta does to find and report child sexual abuse material to law enforcement through an independent group called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You heard the state's lawyer talk about that. He referred to it as NCMEC. And this is an independent group that Meta will report child sexual abuse material to, and NCMEC will then report it to the appropriate law enforcement authorities. So when Meta does find apparent child sexual abuse material that it believes violates federal law, it reports it to NCMEC, and as I said, NCMEC goes on to forward it to authorities. You don't have to take my word for it. The New Mexico Attorney General, Raul Torres, the guy suing Meta in this very case, gave an interview in a podcast last year. He mostly criticized Meta, that's for sure, but he did admit this. Quote, I do want to credit some of the social media applications and platforms, including Meta. To a certain extent, they do report images to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That is absolutely true, end quote. And Meta's tips help save real kids, including right here in New Mexico. You will hear from Antigone Davis, Meta's global head of safety. She will testify that a few years ago, NCMEC gave Meta a 215-page book called Children Protected as a Result of Facebook Reports to the Cyber Tip Line. Cyber Tip Line is basically the NCMEC reporting. The book included stories of 115 children who were saved and more than 40 predators prosecuted thanks to tips from Meta. Ms. Davis will explain that this information confirmed for Meta that it was successfully helping protect kids on its apps. For example, Meta gave NCMEC a tip about a child predator in Quay County, New Mexico. And in response to this tip, New Mexico authorities arrested a 29-year-old man and charged him with multiple felonies relating to child exploitation of girls between 14 and 17. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is an example of Meta helping teens in the real world. Meta also works with first responders to protect people who are having suicidal thoughts. Ms. Davis, the global head of safety, will testify that Meta has asked first responders to do what they call wellness checks for more than 12,000 people who are at risk of suicide in the United States. I want to give you one example. A man in Indiana was streaming a Facebook video holding a gun, saying he intended to die by suicide. He was talking on the phone, saying goodbye to his family, including his child. Meta's automated systems flagged this for Meta's security team, who called emergency responders to let them know about this and also warn them that the man had a gun. Fortunately, law enforcement was able to locate the man before he harmed himself and transported him to a hospital for medical care. These are just two of the many, many examples of Meta trying to protect users in the real world. And I bet you haven't ever heard about any of this in the press. The state claims that Meta doesn't care about its users and puts profit over people. When the state says that, I want you to remember these kinds of stories. So why does Meta go to all these lengths to get rid of bad content and help people? The first is, it's the right thing to do. Meta was founded on the mission to connect people all over the world. That's what Meta wants to do. Disturbing content is the opposite of what Meta wants. It wants people to have positive experiences. But the other reason Meta does all this is because good experiences are good for Meta's business. It is true that Meta is in business to make money. This is America. There's nothing wrong with that. Meta makes money by selling ads. If users have bad experiences, they'll stop using Facebook and Instagram. Lots of other social networks have gone down the tubes because they didn't provide good experiences. And if advertisers think that Facebook and Instagram are not safe, they won't advertise on them. Guy Rosen, Meta's Chief Information Security Officer, will testify what you see on the screen. No one wants to use an app where they see offensive content and have bad experiences. Also, another document from Meta explains helping people have safe experiences is best for our business. We've always had the commercial incentive to remove harmful content from our platform. People don't want to see it when they use our apps, and advertisers don't want their ads next to it. Meta works hard to protect its users because it's the right thing to do and also because it's good for business. Meta succeeds in removing the vast majority of bad content like child exploitation and pro-suicide material. For example, in 2024, Meta told the public that it estimates that fewer than 0.01% of views on Instagram violate Meta's child exploitation rules. Meta acknowledges that any instance of child exploitation material is one too many. And that is why Meta is constantly trying to improve its automated system and its human reviewers to combat online child exploitation. I skipped over one. Meta also disclosed to the public that in 2024, it took down 13 million photos and videos on Facebook for violating its rules against child sexual exploitation. Almost 97% of the content Meta takes down for violating its child safety rules is taken down before any user reports it. When users report content that violates those rules, that content is prioritized for human review. It jumps the line. Similarly, 99% of the suicide and self-injury content that Meta removes is taken down before any user reports it. You're going to hear from Mary Worth, an independent expert who is a pioneer in child safety on the internet. And she will tell you that Meta leads the industry at combating things like child exploitation content. No other tech company is better. Now, Meta works hard to develop the best systems possible, but it's really important for you to understand that Meta cannot catch 100% of the bad content, and I want to explain why. If you just think about it for a minute, there are more than 1 billion pictures, comments, texts, videos posted on Instagram and Facebook every day. Now, we all know billion is a big number, but if you think of it this way, if you started counting to 1 billion right now, you would finish in the year 2057. It would take you 31 years just to count that high. That's how much gets posted every single day. Now, the vast majority of these are perfectly fine posts about your grandma, posts about your kid's dance recital. But a small number are really bad. And if you can see the illustration on the screen, the light green ones are the good ones, and the dark green ones are the bad ones. And the problem here is that Meta has to look for a tiny needle in a giant haystack. So that's one reason why this is not as easy as it sounds. And it also can't be fixed once and for all. The state's own experts are going to admit that it's not possible to remove all the bad content. In fact, that in that same podcast where the Attorney General, Mr. Torres, was attacking Meta, he also admitted the same thing. Quote, "There is so much volume and so much traffic. If you think about how many posts are on these platforms on any given day and any given moment, it's virtually impossible," right? To make it even harder, the bad guys are constantly changing their tactics. When Meta builds a new tool, the bad guys try to circumvent it. And I want to give you a simple example. And this is a real example. To avoid Meta's safeguards, child predators started using the term cheese pizza because it has the same initials as child pornography. Now, of course, most people who say child cheese pizza are talking about something that's perfectly good and perfectly fine. But some predators are trying to hide from Meta's automated systems by using the term cheese pizza. So as Meta's automated systems caught up with this, the bad guys switched tactics and they started using terms like caldo de pollo. My Spanish pronunciation is bad, but you get the point. It's the same initials, CP. And this happens over and over and over. It's a constant battle between Meta and the bad guys who are trying to avoid Meta's safeguards. And this is why Meta is constantly adding more and more tools and updating existing ones to keep its apps safe. Another reason that this is hard is that some of these decisions are not black and white. Let's talk about a tough subject that the state's lawyer brought up, suicide. Someone might post a graphic video of a person dying by suicide, and of course that should be taken down. But other posts are in more of a gray area. For example, some people post about how they had suicidal feelings and they got help that changed their lives. Other people discuss suicide support groups like the one that you can see on the screen. Should Meta remove these posts even though they make reference to suicide or might tell stories about someone having suicidal thoughts? Ms. Davis, who I talked about earlier, will testify that Meta works with outside experts on these topics to figure out where to draw the line on this difficult subject. Meta wants to help people, but it doesn't want to hurt them. So balancing between those is difficult, and Meta talks to experts about that. Another complication is that we have free speech in America. Although Meta has not been perfect on this over the years, Meta knows people have free speech rights. So Meta has to constantly work to balance safety and free speech. If Meta removes too much content, then people get mad at it for censorship. If Meta doesn't remove enough, then that could be an issue for safety. No matter what Meta does, someone won't be happy. Meta is constantly trying to balance these trade-offs, but it's not always easy. Now, one point I want to pause here. This case is not about decisions by Meta on politics or disinformation or elections or anything like that. I know people have strong views about that on both sides of the aisle. This case is about Meta's disclosures on teen safety. Now, you heard the state talk about Molly Russell, who was the young woman from England who died by suicide back in 2017. And Molly's death was a terrible tragedy, and again, as the father of two teenage daughters myself, my heart goes out to her father and the rest of her family. And look, suicide is heartbreaking and it's tragic, and the underlying causes can be complicated. Meta's executives like Ms. Davis and Ms. Bickert, who will testify in this case, feel very strongly about helping Meta's users on this issue. And they're going to talk to you about how much they care about it. And I want you to know that at the time of Molly's death in 2017, Meta was already working on improving its technology to help users experiencing suicidal thoughts. We've already talked about some of the things that Meta does, like the wellness checks, like saving that man in Indiana. And in the 9 years since that terrible tragedy, Meta has continued to build new tools to remove content that promotes suicide while also trying to support people who might be having suicidal thoughts. And you can see on the screen, I obviously don't have time to go through all of these, but these are just some of the tools that Meta has developed over that time. Meta also has improved its systems to try to prevent suicidal content from being shown to teens like Ms. Russell. For example, when a teen searches for words related to suicide or eating disorders, you can see on the screen, if you search for it, Meta hides the search results and directs the teens to resources so they can get help. You can see help is available with a helpline. In addition, Meta automatically limits the types of content that are recommended to teens. This is one of the protections of the teen accounts that I told you about earlier. Facebook and Instagram recommend content through something that's called a recommendation algorithm. The state's lawyer talked about that. An algorithm is just a computer program that tries to predict what content you might like and find interesting. Many tech companies use them. For example, if you watch a movie on Netflix, it might recommend a similar movie to you. That's an algorithm. Teen accounts are automatically set to try to prevent the algorithm from recommending content that is inappropriate for teens. For example, Meta's systems are designed to avoid showing content to teens, encouraging suicide or self-harm. Today, teen accounts are automatically set to rules inspired by age 13 movie ratings. So Meta's systems are designed to show teens content that is similar to what they would see in an age-appropriate movie. Parents can also choose how restrictive to set these filters. You can see on the screen, parents can choose to keep the 13 plus setting or to have a more restrictive setting called limited content, or at the bottom, you can have a wider set of content. I want to show you a short video, show how easy it is to change these settings. A parent clicks Manage Setting, and then can choose the setting for their kid, age 13 plus, if you want to go with the standard one, or you can do more limited content. It's just that easy. Meta also gives users, including teens, tools to understand and adjust their own algorithm. And I don't have time to discuss all of them, but one of them is you can click a button to reset your algorithm so it starts fresh if you're getting stuff from your algorithm that you don't like. These are some of the many ways Meta tries to help teens struggling with mental health and give parents more control over what their kids can see on Meta's apps. Now look, are these tools perfect? Of course not. An automated system and human reviewers will make mistakes. That's what Meta has said to the public over and over again. Meta discloses that its systems aren't perfect and bad content gets through its safeguards. That's why Meta is constantly working to improve those systems. Okay, we've talked about Meta's policies. Now let's talk about another category of statements the state claims are knowingly false. The state claims that Meta lied when it said, quote, when we become aware of apparent child exploitation, we report it to NCMEC in compliance with federal law. That statement is true. When Meta finds this material, Meta reports it to NCMEC so law enforcement can bring criminals to justice. Now, the state showed you a document discussing temporary glitches in Meta's computer systems that delayed some tips. And I want to put that up on the screen. The state showed you the top, but what they didn't show you is what actually happened. Back in 2020, and this was a while ago, Meta found a glitch and fixed it within 2 weeks. You can see on the screen it says status mitigated. That means it's fixed. And you can see also how this was found. That's the bottom. It says, how was this issue detected? Audit. That means that Meta is proactively checking its systems to see if they're working. And if it finds a glitch, it fixes it. That doesn't make Meta's statement false. It makes Meta's statement true. It's trying to find the NCMEC material and report it to NCMEC. By the way, the state's lawyer said that he didn't want to be cherry picking. That's cherry picking right there. The bottom line is that when Meta becomes aware of child sexual abuse material on its platforms, it reports it to NCMEC as quickly as possible. Meta's statements were true. Now, the state also talked about NCMEC. You heard about that. And one thing that you should know is NCMEC publicly praised Meta, stating that Meta goes, quote, above and beyond to make sure there are no portions of their network where this type of activity occurs. NCMEC also said that, quote, some other massive companies report fewer tips than Meta because, quote, they choose not to look. Meta does look. This NCMEC statement shows why Meta believes that it is the best in the business at detecting and reporting this type of material. Let's discuss another category that the state alleged and talked about earlier today. The state claims that Meta lied when it said that it, quote, requires people to be at least 13 years old to sign up for Facebook and Instagram. So let's look at that policy. That's what the policy says. And look at what the very next sentence says. It says, while many people are honest about their age, we know that young people can lie about their date of birth. So the state says that this policy statement is false because some kids lie about their age. Well, Meta discloses it right there. And here's another document, this is in the Parents Guide, where Meta says the same thing. Meta discloses, it doesn't deceive. It tells everyone there are some 13-year-olds who lie about their age to try to get on Meta's apps. Meta does not want kids under 13 on its apps, so it does a lot to try to remove them. First, when you sign up, you have to give your age. This is called in the industry an age screen. If you say you're under 13, you don't get on the app. Now, of course, Meta knows that some kids lie about their age, which they say publicly. Meta says, while age screens are common in our industry, young people can and often do get around them by misrepresenting their age. So Meta builds other safeguards to remove kids under 13 from its apps. First, Meta allows anyone to report accounts of kids they think are under 13. You can see here on the screen a very simple form to report underage users. So if a parent or a teacher is concerned about underage users on the apps, he or she can report it very easily. Meta also uses automated technology to find people who are breaking the age requirements. The system looks for clues, like whether a person discloses their age or their school year in their Instagram biography. If the system finds an account that might be under 13, it is sent to review by a human, and Meta removes kids it determines are under 13. The industry expert I talked to you about, who's a pioneer, Mary Worth, will testify that Meta's approach is exactly what I would advise any other platform to do. Now again, are these tools perfect? Of course not, but they are constantly improving. And Meta does not hide that fact from the public either. Instead, Meta has told the world that despite its efforts, thousands and thousands of kids lie to get on the apps. For example, in 2021, Mr. Mosseri, the head of Instagram, told the public that, quote, the company had removed more than 600,000 accounts for violating its rules on age limits in just a 3-month period. So Meta isn't hiding that large number of kids are on its apps. That's disclosure, not deception. So this leads me to another point that I want to make, which is, as we've discussed, the state claims that Meta made several false or misleading statements on its website or in public comments. The state brought this lawsuit even though the evidence will not show that any particular parent or teen in the state of New Mexico actually read any of Meta's statements or was harmed in any way by it. You don't have to take my word for it. In pretrial proceedings in this case, the state of New Mexico designated one of its employees, Crystal Adams, to speak on its behalf. Before giving this testimony, she prepared for more than 50 hours. She met with lawyers.
May we approach?
Yes, counsel. So as I was saying, Ms. Adams prepared for her testimony, and you can see on the screen that she testified under oath that she did not know of any New Mexican who had ever seen any of the statements. That means the state is bringing this lawsuit, and we're going to have a trial for several weeks, even though the state has already admitted that it has no evidence that a specific teen or parent from New Mexico actually read or was harmed by reading any of the challenge statements. Now, I want to change topics and talk about the state's claim about predators finding victims on Meta's apps. Let me start with what I hope we can all agree on, which is that this type of abuse is horrifying. It's against the law, it's against Meta's rules, and Meta does not want it to happen on its apps, period. Any suggestion that Meta willfully designed its apps to allow predators to find and abuse teenagers is completely false. The evidence will show that Meta designs its apps to help people connect with friends and family and build community, not to harm anyone. Let's start with the fact that Meta publicly warns people about the risk that criminals might use its apps. For example, in 2019, Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, publicly stated, when billions of people use a service to connect, some of them are going to misuse it for truly terrible things like child exploitation. In 2023, Meta told the public that between 2020 and 2023, it had disrupted 37 child exploitation networks and removed nearly 200,000 accounts associated with those networks. And remember those transparency reports we talked about. Meta discloses every 3 months how much child sexual abuse, exploitation content it removes from Facebook and Instagram. Meta discloses that its proactive systems, as good as they are, do not detect all rule-breaking content. For example, Meta recently disclosed that from July to September 2025, 3.3% of the child exploitation material that it removed from Instagram was not caught by Meta's proactive detection, but instead reported by users first. So Meta is very clear with the public that despite its efforts, its apps can be misused for child exploitation, and that some users may encounter some of that bad content. That is disclosure, not deception. But Meta doesn't just warn the public about this risk, Meta also works hard to protect teens. For example, Meta builds tools to help them. So for example, teens can block people who they don't know and prevent those people from communicating with them. You can see right there, the teen can block that person, and you can select the reason that you're blocking that person and report it. Meta also prevents adults from messaging teens they're not connected with. This is really important because the way that the predators try to groom the kids is they are messaging with the teens, and Meta prevents adults from messaging teens. Also, when a teen creates an account, it is automatically set to private, which means that strangers cannot see the posts that the teen makes or the videos, and they can't comment on them. These restrictions that I'm talking about have existed for many years. They are now part of teen accounts, the bundle of protections we talked about earlier today. Teen accounts are automatically private, and random adult strangers can't message teens. Teen accounts have added even more protections. They allow parents to see exactly who their kid has messaged in the past 7 days. So if a predator is messaging your kid, you can see that for yourself. This helps protect teens from adults they don't know, while also helping parents protect their kids online. These tools are all really important because they help stop predators from contacting teens and communicating with them. That helps prevent child exploitation. Now, Meta does know that some teens lie about their age. And so it has automated technology to try to find teens who might be doing that and then putting them into the teen accounts. And you'll hear testimony about that at the trial. I want to tell you about one more tool. Meta built automated systems, and this is complicated, but we will have witnesses that will explain it to you in more detail. But Meta built automated systems to look at 60 different signals to identify users who might behave suspiciously towards teens. So it's looking at what an account is doing to see what they're doing bad. And if enough of those signals are triggered, then that account will be removed entirely. So it might look for things like, things like messaging, or if a teen blocks someone, or repeatedly the person is searching for inappropriate material. Those are the kinds of signals that the automated system is looking for, and block those people. Obviously, Meta does not want predators to connect with teens. Meta's warned parents of the risk, built tools to help teens and parents, and Meta has made these safeguards better and better over time. Meta does even more than develop tools to protect teens. Meta hires safety professionals such as former prosecutors and former law enforcement personnel. Meta has entire teams of people whose job is to work with law enforcement to go after predators in the real world. One of these teams is called I3. That stands for Integrity, Investigations, and Intel. Meta thinks of this team as like the special forces handling the toughest situations. The I3 team includes former federal law enforcement officers who conduct investigations on Instagram and Facebook looking for child predators and child exploitation content. This team has taken down dozens of pedophile networks and removed nearly 200,000 accounts. For example, in 2017, the I3 team reported 88 child safety cases to law enforcement and was actively investigating 100 more. As a result of I3's work, kids were saved from dangerous situations, including right next door in Arizona. Another example, in 2021, the I3 team disrupted a network of 45,000 people who were sharing child sexual abuse material on a different company's app. I3 found out about that and reported them to NCMEC, who then forwarded it on to law enforcement. Meta's proactive investigations help protect teens on Meta's apps and in the real world. You will hear testimony from industry experts that Meta's efforts to protect children are the best in the business. Even the former New Mexico Attorney General told New Mexicans in 2018 that the state has successfully partnered with Facebook and Instagram to combat child exploitation in New Mexico. We wish the state would partner with us rather than sue us. Now, I want to talk about another topic briefly that plaintiffs' counsel brought up, called end-to-end encryption, which secures messages on Facebook Messenger app. The state suggests that Meta launched encryption because it doesn't care about safety, but the evidence will show that's wrong. Meta launched encryption on Facebook Messenger because it provides privacy and security benefits. And the privacy benefits are why encryption is standard among popular messaging apps. If you use iMessage, that's end-to-end encrypted. If you use Signal, that's end-to-end encrypted. Not only that, federal agencies like the Cyber Defense Agency, which is responsible for keeping Americans safe from cyber attacks, and multiple states' attorneys general, including California and Arizona, have publicly encouraged Americans to use encryption to protect their communication. If encryption is as bad as the state suggests, why are the feds recommending that you use it? Okay. The last thing I want to talk about on child safety before we move to the next topic is the investigation that the state talked about in its opening statement. This was the Issa B account that the state's lawyer told you about. What the state didn't tell you is the evidence will show that the state designed the investigation to intentionally circumvent Meta's safeguards to make Facebook and Instagram look more dangerous than they really are. The evidence will show that that the state's investigation wasn't trying to get to the truth. It was trying to get Meta. The investigators hired by the Attorney General's office did things that are frankly shocking. The state bought stolen, hacked Facebook and Instagram accounts off the internet. The state's investigators then pretended to be teenage girls. Worse, The state used real pictures of real people without their consent. Now just think about that for a minute. To bring this lawsuit, the state used stolen, hacked accounts and pictures belonging to real people. It gets worse. Using these fake accounts, the state contacted suspected pedophiles, including a key target in an ongoing criminal investigation. I want to pause again and emphasize that. The state used real pictures of real people to lure suspected predators. The state put real people at risk. The state's investigators then started sexual communications with the suspected predators. And here's probably the most surprising thing of all. These investigators viewed illegal child sexual abuse material and didn't report it to Meta, so Meta could report it to NCMEC and it could go to the authorities. Finally, the state failed to preserve and destroyed evidence relating to its investigation. You're going to hear the state's investigators admit they wiped the devices that they used for the investigation, and they failed to preserve thousands of messages they exchanged on Meta's apps. Now think about that. The state destroyed evidence that didn't fit its narrative. One of the state's investigators testified under oath. Here's the question and answer. Question: you purchased hacked and stolen accounts, found and looked at child pornography, and you did not report it. Is that right? Answer: from a yes or no perspective, yes. Now let's talk about that Issa B account that the state touted. The state's investigator used a real picture of a real person without her consent for the fake account of Issa B. Here's the picture. We have applied the black box on the screen to protect this poor woman's privacy, but the state has already publicized this picture. The state put this picture without the black box in the state's publicly filed complaint. The state's investigators then used this account with this real woman's picture to communicate with a person the state had been investigating as a child sex predator. A simple Google search by that predator would have allowed him to find this woman. That's how we discovered she was a real person. The state put her at risk for this investigation. Now, the state's investigator who created the Issa B account that the state talked about this morning deliberately registered it as an adult woman in her 20s, not a teenager. Why would the investigator do that? Well, we don't have to guess. This is his report on the screen. His own report admits he registered Issa B as an adult so that he could bypass Meta's safeguards for teens. That comes right out of his own investigative report. By the way, the other fake account that the state's lawyer told you about this morning, I think her name was Daisy Rowanhorse, she also registered as an adult. Now, if Issa B were a real teen on Facebook, Meta would have provided many protections. Her account would have been private by default, which means pedophiles wouldn't have been able to see her posts. Adult strangers could not have messaged her, and her parents could have viewed her messenger contact list and privacy and safety settings. The evidence will show that the state rigged this investigation to get a fake result. The investigation was not designed to get at the truth about how Meta's apps actually work in the real world for real teenagers. When you see all the evidence, we think you will reject the reliability and fairness of the state's fake account investigation. The state is also going to present you with evidence of other testing of Meta's apps. And what I want you to remember about that is that the evidence will show that this testing that they're going to try to show you was done by biased advocates who were trying to reach a predetermined result just like this. They were trying to break Meta's systems to get a predetermined result rather than figure out how the systems would work for a regular teen. I want to pause here and say again that of course Meta doesn't want criminals to misuse Facebook and Instagram to harm children. That's why Meta warns the world about this risk, builds tools to help teens and parents, works with law enforcement to put the bad guys in jail. When the state presents evidence about kids being abused, I just ask you to remember that it is the criminal who is responsible for that heinous act, a criminal who broke Meta's rules and the law. Also remember that as a private company, Meta can't arrest anyone. That's the state's job. In fact, Meta would rather work with the state than be here in court defending a weeks-long lawsuit. You will hear evidence that Meta gave thousands of tips about potential child exploitation to NCMEC, which passed them on to the New Mexico Attorney General's office. You will also learn, as we learned in the pretrial proceedings, that the Attorney General's office had a backlog of more than 1,000 tips that it hadn't resolved. Some of those tips represent real kids. Okay, I want to turn to the third topic. The state claims that Meta willfully and unconscionably designed Facebook and Instagram to addict teenagers, and that Meta caused teens mental health harm. The evidence will show that's wrong. The evidence will show that Meta designed its apps to help people connect with their friends and family, not to cause teens or anyone else harm. Meta wants everyone, including teenagers, to have a good experience, and the vast majority of people do. But there is no doubt that for some people, using social media can be habit-forming and can interfere with other parts of their lives. We all see people glued to their phones, like our illustration here. Maybe they're using Facebook. Maybe they're playing games on their phone. Maybe they're streaming videos like YouTube. People say all the time, I'm addicted to my phone. Some doctors call this problematic use, and that's the internal term that Meta uses. Meta agrees that some people use social media too much and in ways that can be problematic. It's no different from lots of other things that can be good, but not in moderation, can be abused or overused. So for example, there's nothing wrong with watching TV. It's entertaining, it's enjoyable, but some people spend too much time on the couch watching TV and they might wish that they had done something else with that time. They might say they're addicted to TV or they're addicted to the show Breaking Bad or some other show. But that's not a diagnosable addiction in the scientific sense. The same is true for social media. Some people use it too much and say they're addicted to it. That's right. People say that. But problematic use of social media is not the same as clinical addictions that doctors diagnose. You're going to see evidence about this during the trial, but according to the American Psychiatric Association, that they don't recognize the concept of social media addiction in the same way as addiction to drugs and alcohol. What you see on the screen is what's called the DSM, which is basically the official manual for recognized mental disorders. And the American Psychiatric Association studied this and decided that social media addiction is not a thing. The DSM recognizes 300 mental health conditions, including substance addiction, but it does not recognize social media addiction. Now, some of the state's witnesses, like Dr. Lemke, who the state's lawyer told you about today, are going to come and tell you that social media addiction is just as bad as addiction to drugs and alcohol. I'm going to ask you to use your common sense. There is a huge difference between addiction to fentanyl and addiction to Facebook. You might have seen the devastation that fentanyl addiction can cause in a community. It can lead to deaths from overdose or terrible withdrawal symptoms. Facebook is not like fentanyl. No one is going to overdose on Facebook. Scientific studies say that people don't get withdrawal symptoms when they stop using Facebook like you would if you stopped using fentanyl. One of those studies is up on the screen. It says there's no evidence for that. But look, whether you call it addiction or problematic use, I want to be clear. Meta doesn't want anyone to feel like they are using Facebook and Instagram in an unhealthy way. You can see on the screen, Mr. Mosseri testified that he does not want Instagram to be addictive. Now, actions speak louder than words, and Meta has built tools to help people reduce problematic use and feel good about the time they're spending on Meta's apps. I don't have time today to discuss all of them, but I want to mention two. One of them is called Sleep Mode, which reminds people it's late and they should close the app. It's like a nudge to help you get off the app. Another important tool is Daily Limit. You can set a total amount of time you want to be on Facebook or Instagram, and again, it will nudge you and say, maybe you should get off. The teen accounts that we talked about earlier are automatically set to sleep mode from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. every day. And they are automatically set the daily limit to 60 minutes. Now, parents can change these automatic settings in a bunch of ways. They could change the times that their kid can use Facebook or Instagram. They can change the amount of time their kid can use Facebook and Instagram. And they can also change it so that when that time limit expires, Instagram shuts off. That's up to the parents if they want to do that. Meta's parent guide, which I talked about earlier, shows parents how these time management tools work so they can learn how to use them if they choose. These and many other tools help parents control the amount of time their teens spend on Facebook and Instagram to protect them from an unhealthy amount of time. So I just want to pause on this for a second, because you might ask yourself, why would Meta build tools to cause people to use its apps less? Other businesses don't do that. Does Coca-Cola say to you, you shouldn't drink too many sodas because they're unhealthy, or you shouldn't have one right before bed because it has caffeine and it might keep you up? They don't. But Meta does do that. If Meta was really trying to addict people and harm teen mental health, why would it do that? So why does Meta do it? Well, the first reason is Meta wants its users to feel good about the time they spend on the apps. Up on the screen is an internal document. You remember the state's lawyer talking about internal documents. Here's an internal document talking about Meta's goals. It says, quote, "We want people, especially teens, to feel good about the time they are spending on our apps." The document says that is a North Star, a guiding principle. Meta has teams of research scientists that they've hired to study overuse and figure out ways to help users. Meta's researchers have found that a small number of people have severe problematic use. Now, different studies, you'll see different studies with different numbers. This particular one says 3% of users have severe problematic use. But here's the point that I really want to emphasize for you all. The purpose of this research is to help Meta develop tools to help users reduce problematic use of Facebook and Instagram. This is a document that I am sure the state is going to show you during this trial. And what they might not show you is this page. The reason that Meta is doing this research is to figure out how can we help these people. This is all of these right here are from Meta's internal studies. Here's another one. We're trying to build, it's the same document actually. We want to build new tools to help people not obsessively check their accounts. And other internal documents confirm Meta's goal. You can see this one. We want to ensure that people have control over their Facebook use and that it doesn't harm their well-being. This is an internal document that Meta is talking internally about why it's trying to study this question. Another one on the left, our goal is to offer supportive, appropriate tools. In the middle, a focus on problematic use will allow us to help a larger group of people. Another one on the right, reduce behaviors of problematic use. This is why Meta is doing the research. The state's trying to punish Meta for doing the right thing. There is not a single document that the state's lawyers showed you where Meta is trying to figure out how to addict people. These documents, Meta is trying to figure out how to help people. Now, to try to get around that, the state's lawyers cherry-pick quotes from documents to give an inaccurate impression. That's what the evidence is going to show. For example, the teen fundamentals presentation that the state's lawyer showed you earlier today that talked about dopamine. What the state didn't show you was the summary of Meta's internal discussion about its research. The Meta employees said, quote, "There is a balance we need to strike between driving engagement and being mindful of teens' well-being. Quote, we do not want to drive usage that is problematic to teens." That is what Meta was trying to do in this internal research. These documents show that Meta is researching to help teens avoid problematic use, not to try to turn them into addicts. And again, that's not just because it's the right thing to do. Helping people feel good about the time they spend on Meta's apps is also good for Meta's business. Meta's research has found that Meta will make more money in the long run if people feel safe and happy using the apps. Now that might seem a little counterintuitive at first, but when you think about it, it makes sense. If a person uses the apps too much and feels bad, they are less likely to come back and use the app again, and they are more likely to cancel or delete their account. Meta's research has found that people are 4 times more likely to delete their account if they have problematic use. That research has also found that 30% of people who do delete their accounts do so because they feel like they're using them too much. So Meta tries to prevent problematic use, not create it. Now, the state claims that Meta designs its apps specifically to target teens, and the evidence is going to show that's just wrong. So first, the evidence will show that teens account for a very tiny percentage of Meta's revenue, less than 2%. Teens, it makes sense, right? Because teens have less money to spend. They don't have credit cards. Thank goodness my 17-year-old doesn't have a credit card. But that means that advertisers spend less to advertise to teens. What Meta really wants is for teens to be happy and have a good experience so that they will continue using the apps in their 20s and 30s. That's better for Meta's long-term success. Meta does not want miserable doom-scrolling teens because that will hurt its business in the long run. Meta's in business for the long run. Now, the evidence will show that Meta disclosed to the world that some people have problematic use. And again, this is important because the state has to show that Meta knowingly misled the public about this. For example, way back in 2017, 9 years ago, Meta published research about whether spending time on social media is bad for us. And I won't go through it all now, but it talks about problematic use of social media. In 2019, Meta told the public that 3% number that I told you about serious problematic use. That's disclosure, not deception. And if you use your common sense, you know that Meta couldn't have hidden this fact from people because everyone knows that some people are on their phones too much. The state also claims that Meta builds features in order to addict kids. And I'm going to go through these quickly because it's been a long day. But I want to start with the algorithm. Remember, the algorithm just tries to show kids or actually everyone, what they're interested in. If you like cat pictures, it'll show you cat pictures. This is no different than Netflix recommending a show to you based on some show that you already saw. Helping people find content they will enjoy is good, not bad. The bottom line is the algorithm is not designed to turn people into addicts. Meta, like many other companies, use the algorithm to show interesting content to people so they will enjoy it and have a good experience. The state also attacks infinite scroll. Infinite scroll just means you can keep scrolling. Meta didn't invent this. Lots of apps use it. LinkedIn, Reddit, Netflix. TV is infinite scroll. You can click through the channels for as long as you want. There's nothing bad or illegal about that. The state also attacked Meta's use of notifications. Instagram and Facebook will notify you if you have a message or something that you might be interested in. Many online services use notifications. Your cell phone will ding if you get a text. Your ESPN app will tell you the football score, which spoiled it for me last night. The New York Times app will tell you, alert you to breaking news. Meta's apps do the same thing. Remember sleep mode? Sleep mode turns off the notifications. And if you don't want the notifications, you can just silence your phone. To sum up on this point, the state says that Meta is targeting teens with these features. The evidence is going to show that's wrong because these features work the same for teens as they do adults, with one exception. The algorithm has features in it that show less bad content or try to limit the content that teens can see. Remember the 13 plus content that we talked about? So if anything, these features are more protective of teens, not trying to target teens in some way different than the way they work for everyone else. Okay. Last few things. The evidence will show that Meta did not design its apps to cause mental health harm. In fact, the evidence will show that Facebook and Instagram can have positive impacts on mental health. And again, I will go a little faster because I want to get you through this, but the state's own expert, Dr. O'Brien, testified that there are positive aspects of social media, particularly for children and youth who are in vulnerable spots. And this is really important. These are the people who may not have much community support, she said. The National Academy of Sciences, which is a blue ribbon group of federal experts, found that social media actually helps teen mental health overall. They found that 91% of teens said that social media has a mostly positive or neutral effect on them. Even the state of New Mexico agrees with this when it isn't trying to sue. This on the screen is a study from the New Mexico Department of Health about social media and teens. It says more teens say that using social media has a positive effect. The New Mexico survey finds that, quote, teens feel less lonely and more confident when they use social media. And, quote, these effects are greatest in the at-risk youth population. I also want you to note this thing at the bottom. It says this may not be how we connected to people, meaning older adults, but we need to accept that this is how this generation connects and builds relationships. That's good, not bad. The evidence will also show that the state is wrong, that Instagram and Facebook have caused a teen mental health crisis in New Mexico. The science doesn't support that, and I'm going to skip through this quickly, but scientific studies don't support that. You're going to hear from Dr. Auerbach, who is a professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, who is going to give his opinion that that is not right. The evidence will also show that many factors beyond social media contribute much more to mental health issues for teens. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but use your common sense. Family issues, anxiety, drugs or alcohol use. If you have a parent who has a psychiatric illness, things like that. Dr. Auerbach is going to talk about that. Even the state's own witnesses agree with this. Two of the witnesses, we had a chance to ask questions under oath, and they talked about these other contributing factors like growing up in poverty, divorce, abuse, school shooter drills, immigration, things like that. The state also ignores that Facebook and Instagram aren't even nearly the most popular social media apps in New Mexico. In fact, teens in New Mexico use Meta's apps far less often than others. This is, again, New Mexico Department of Health document. Instagram is 4th on the league table. Facebook is all the way at the bottom at 1%. And remember, the state has the burden of proof here. When you have seen the evidence, we hope you will conclude that the state can't meet its burden. I want to talk for just a minute about research, and then we'll get to the conclusion here. As I mentioned before, Meta conducts research in order to figure out how to help improve the apps. And the state's lawyer talked about Mr. Sadazon, who's going to come testify and say that starting in 2021, Meta started tightening up its control of the research. And I want to explain why that is. In 2021, someone took, without authorization, internal research and leaked it to the press. And a national newspaper wrote a slanted story on this research. And what the national newspaper didn't report on, and they were trying to suggest that the research showed that Instagram was bad for teen girls. What the press didn't report was the actual conclusion of the research, which was that Instagram is more likely to make things better than worse. In fact, the survey showed that for 23 out of 24 categories, Instagram made teens feel better than worse. Just a couple of examples. More than 88% of teens said Instagram helped or was neutral for anxiety. More than 91% of teens said Instagram either helped with sadness or made no impact. Now look, it's not surprising that the press ignored this positive information. What's more likely to get clicks, a balanced and fair account of social media, or a flashy headline? But these leaks put Meta in a tough spot. It was doing this research to help its users. But it was concerned that people would be taking the research without authorization. So Meta decided to create new safeguards to make sure that its research was carefully designed and accurately explained. Meta wanted to be more careful because it knew that people might leak the research. Now, when the state calls Mr. Sadazon to testify, he's going to talk to you to try to justify his content and all his conduct. All that I ask is that you wait until Meta has a chance to ask him questions about what he did, what his motives were, before you decide whether he is credible as a truth teller or not. I also ask that you keep an open mind until you hear all the evidence, including from people who will come from Meta to testify about research. The important point is Meta does continue to do research to help it understand how to make Facebook and Instagram safer for all users, including teens. That's good, not bad. All right, let me wrap up so we can get to the evidence. The state's case against Meta basically boils down to 3 buckets as I see it. First, the state claims that Meta knowingly misled New Mexicans about the safety of Facebook and Instagram. And while you are hearing the evidence throughout this trial, I just want to ask you to think about these questions. If Meta wanted to mislead people about safety, then why does it disclose to everyone who signs up that you may see offensive and illegal content? Why does Meta disclose to the world that its safeguards are not perfect and some bad content gets through? Why does Meta disclose how much bad content it removes? Why does Meta hire a football stadium full of people to help keep the app safe? Why does Meta build and improve tools like teen accounts to help protect teens and help parents protect their teens? The reality is that Meta disclosed the risks so that parents and teens could decide for themselves whether to use Facebook and Instagram. Meta disclosed, it didn't deceive. The next question is whether Meta willfully and unconscionably designed and operated its apps to allow harm to children. As you hear the evidence, ask yourself these questions. If Meta designed its apps to help predators, why does it warn people that predators might misuse those apps? Why does Meta build tools to protect teens, like blocking adults? Why does Meta report thousands of predators to NCMEC so law enforcement can put them behind bars like that guy in Quay County that I told you about? Why does Meta hire former federal law enforcement officers to try to keep the app safe for teens? One of those people is sitting right there in that chair. Mr. Sinha used to be a federal prosecutor right here in New Mexico. He is going to testify about his work. His whole job is to help protect teens. Ask yourself, if Meta wants to help predators, why did it hire Mr. Sinha? Someone who's dedicated his career to protecting kids. The reality is Meta absolutely does not want any children to be abused. The state's third claim is that Meta willfully designed Facebook and Instagram to addict teens, causing them mental health harm. Ask yourself, if Meta wanted to addict teens, why does Meta warn the world that some people have problematic use? Why does Meta build tools like daily limit and sleep mode to help reduce the amount of time people spend on the apps? Why does Meta build teen accounts so parents can help control the time their kids spend? If Meta doesn't care about teens' mental health, why did it build cutting-edge tools to prevent teens from seeing suicide and self-harm content? Why did it build tools to give suicide prevention advice to teens who search for that kind of thing? Why does Meta have a team that sends wellness checks to people who might be feeling like suicidal, like the man with the gun in Crisis on Facebook Live I told you about? The reality is Meta wants teens and everyone else to have a positive experience, so they will continue using the apps. As the jury, you get to decide all these questions and many more. I want you to remember the state has the burden of proof. I also want you to remember the old saying that there are 2 sides to every story? Remember, the judge told you at the start of today that there are 2 sides to this lawsuit. And it's important that you keep an open mind and not decide any part of the case until the whole case has been completed and submitted to you. The state gets to put on their case first, and they think it'll take 2 or 3 weeks. I ask that you keep an open mind until you can hear Meta's side of the story. The judge also asked you earlier today to exercise your judgment impartially and without sympathy, prejudice, or bias. I ask that as you consider the evidence, focus on what this case is about. This case is not about whether you like Meta or its CEO, or whether you think there is misinformation on the apps or political interference on the apps. Don't get distracted by the disturbing pictures and images. We all agree those things are terrible. We don't want it on our apps. That's not why we're here. When you are reviewing the evidence, think about the questions I've just asked you, use your common sense, and we are confident that after you review all the evidence and hear from Meta's witnesses, you will find that Meta disclosed, it didn't deceive, and Meta designed its apps to be fun and engaging, not to harm teens or anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for your attentiveness. Post-lunch, that was great effort. What we'll do now is take a short break, and I expect to be about 10, 15 minutes long, and come back in here to continue the case. So with that, thank you. Have a good break.
All rise for the jury.
I can hear you.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, hope that you had a good break. And I will tell you that you're already starting to look like a finely honed drill team as you come in and form two lines there. So quick learners on that front. With that, counsel, you may call your first witness whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, the state calls Catherine De La Rosa Salazar.
Good afternoon. Hi. I swear you in your oath. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thank you. You're now under oath. Please be seated.
Thank you.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes, whenever you're ready, counsel.
Ms. Salazar, where do you work?
At Wilson Middle School in Albuquerque.
And what is your position there?
I am the assistant principal.
How long have you been an assistant principal at Wilson Middle School?
Just over a year. I started in December last year, 2024.
Before then, were you also employed by Wilson Middle School?
I was.
What did you do then?
Before I was assistant principal, I was what we call the restorative justice coach. APS title is Dean of Students. And prior to that, I was the math teacher for 6th grade.
And what does the restorative justice coach or dean of students do?
Mostly it's an oversee of discipline for the school.
And how long were you in the restorative justice position?
I was there for 3 years before taking the position as the assistant principal.
And then before that, how long were you a teacher?
I think it was 3 years. Yeah, I started in 2019 as a math teacher at Wilson. So I'm classroom 1, 2. So it was three years.
And just so, because I know it's different between Santa Fe Public Schools and...
Counsel, I'm sorry. Just if you could move it, probably has a sticky that says "don't move." If you could move it a little bit closer to you, just so we get you picked up a little louder.
How's that?
Is that all right? That's great. Thank you very much.
And I lost my train of thought. Now, did you also teach elementary school at some point?
I did.
And where was that?
So I've taught in different elementary schools. I was at La Merced in Belen many, many years ago. And then I was at A. Montoya Elementary School, which is in the East Mountains of Albuquerque. I taught at Emerson Elementary School as well.
So let's go back to your restorative justice position. What exactly, what was your role there?
So I had a few roles. My first was in working with teachers who needed support in restorative practices. So that's some part of classroom management, but it's really in building relationships with students and how you do that within the course of a classroom. Also in de-escalation strategies when things sort of got a little mixed up in a classroom. I did training. I became a trainer for restorative practices, and so I did training for our whole school. And then along with that, I did discipline. So anytime a student had a disciplinary issue, they were sent to my office, and I worked to work through or solve some of the issues that they were going through.
Do you still work in disciplinary matters in your role as assistant principal?
Among many other things, yes.
And just to step back, can you just tell me exactly what restorative justice is?
So restorative justice practices in an educational setting is really about building relationships with people. It's about when a mistake is made, really listening to the person who was harmed as well as the person who did that harm or people. And then through that, really working through, what were you thinking at the time? What are you thinking now? How can we make things right? How do we set things into a better relationship? How do we rebuild a relationship? So it's really about restoring the environment, the space, and the relationships.
Are restorative practices part of the disciplinary process, or is that a separate track, if you will?
They are with me when I'm doing practices at the school. Not everyone in administration is trained in restorative practices, so sometimes that goes to exclusionary discipline, which is what you see with suspensions or expulsions or things like that.
Now, in addition to your work at the school, in the school setting, do you have another vocation with your church?
I do. So I'm a deacon in the United Methodist Church. My place of service is actually Wilson Middle School, so that is my ministry setting is in Wilson Middle School.
Do you have experience with youth ministry?
I do.
Would you tell the jury about that, please?
So many years ago, it's 2009, I was not a deacon at the time, and I was serving through the women's ministry because I had two young children, and I took care of my niece. And I was tired of being at home by myself with little tiny people, and so I got out into the church. And I developed relationships with a lot of the ladies at the church, and then that got me involved in the they call it SPRC, basically the leadership of the church. While I was there, their youth minister left, and so they needed somebody to take that, and I figured, well, I'm here and I'm not doing anything. And so I became the youth minister at that church, and I served there for 2 years, and then I moved from that church to a different church and served as children and youth ministry at that church.
And what is the youth ministry? What is that, your work there?
So it's really in building relationships with the young people and their families. In these cases, youth ministry was 6th grade because 6th grade is considered middle school in Albuquerque. So 6th grade through graduating seniors. And it's just working with them in whatever their life experience might be. Sometimes it's relationship building again. So, whether that was going to events that they held or like graduations or supporting them in their concerts and things like that. But it's also in building their faith in the faith community. So really guiding them towards relationships with other people within the community. There's always been sort of a disconnect between the older and the younger generation. And so I found ways to build those together. There's a lot of curriculum planning for all of that, and then supporting them when they were struggling. So whether that's through any kind of school issues or family issues or friend issues, our young people have gone through a lot. And so I was that first barrier sometimes of support and really working through that. Now, how do we speak to your families about the things that you're going through? So that's a lot of what I did. And it really was pastoral counseling.
Thank you. While you were answering that question, you said something that triggered my memory as to what I was asking you before I had to adjust the mic. In Albuquerque Public Schools, what are the grades that are in middle school?
For middle school, for APS, 6th through 8th grade.
What ages does that typically correspond to in the
Usually
Albuquerque?
11 through 14. Sometimes we have 10-year-olds and sometimes on the high end for 15-year-olds.
Let's talk a little bit about social media. Do you use social media?
I do.
What platforms do you use in your personal life?
I'm old, so mostly Facebook, but every once in a while I will get onto Instagram.
And what types of posts do you do?
So if it is a public post, most of my stuff is private, but when I do public posting, it's really informational posting, things to be aware of in the community or stuff like that. My personal posts are more of a like, hey, this is what my family did. I think my more recent ones are about when the Lobos went to Phoenix and my husband and I traveled with our children out to the game.
Does Wilson Middle School also have its own social media accounts?
They did. They had an Instagram account. I don't know if it's still up and running. It's still up, but I don't know if anybody runs it anymore.
And how long has it had that social media account in place?
I want to say it's been 2 years now.
And are you familiar with the postings that that account puts on the?
Yeah, so that was created by I'm sorry to interrupt you. That was created by our student council. They wanted to their motto is to promote a culture of kindness over a culture of violence, and so they wanted to promote kindness and change in that respect via social media. So they created this platform that was overseen by, at the time, our student council adult sponsor, and they posted things like Spirit Week events, make sure you wear your pajamas, and then they'd or things that they saw that were kindness in the community. So they, as well as community events.
What platform is that?
That was Instagram.
And do you consider that to be a positive use of social media?
I do.
In your work at the school, do you also encounter negative uses of social media?
Yes, absolutely.
How often do you encounter that type of social media usage?
I would say frequently, at least, well, recently it's been every day. So it depends on the timing for things. So yeah, it's often, it's frequently.
How do you learn about those social media postings that are of a more negative nature?
Students come and tell me.
And what do you then do next?
So it depends on the posting. Sometimes it's they're embarrassed by something that somebody has put up, and or sometimes it's that somebody has said something to them on whether it's private message or it's in a group setting. And so I start off with having conversations with the person who presented the information and ask them what it is that they're wanting from that, depending on the issue. If it's something that's clearly like a threat is being made, then it doesn't matter if the student wants to do anything. I have protocols that I have to follow through APS.
And what are those protocols?
So for threats, we have a threat assessment protocol. It starts with really delving into the student who made the threat, looking at, their academic history, their attendance, their other possible disciplinary actions, whether it's that year or in previous years. I contact our threat assessment department and speak with the threat assessment, the head of threat assessment. And together, she and I will go through and look at if the student has special education, if the student has had any prior threats that were done. And then I speak to first the victim and ask them, what are you feeling in all of this? There are specific questions that I'm required to ask. And then I call in the student and speak to them. Do you know why you're here? And again, there are specific questions that I need to ask that are given by APS. I talk to parents as well. One of the big questions is, do you own a weapon or do you have access to a weapon? And so it just kind of goes from there. The threat assessment person at APS and myself and possibly our principal will decide if this is what type of a threat this is, if it's a temporary, if it's a level 1, or if it's at an extreme level, then authorities are brought in.
Do you, if the situation involves social media, do you do anything to investigate the contents of social media accounts?
Yes.
What do you do?
So, again, sometimes the person, it depends on the platform. For Instagram, particularly, anybody can create a name that they want to. And so sometimes it's hard to figure out, well, who is this person that's making this statement? And so that takes some investigating of figuring out who this person is. And then finding out who the person is. What I do is I sit with the child who's been threatened. I have them place their phone on the table and I have them scroll to show me where the threat was, and let's go a little higher than that. Let's see where this started.
Why do you put it on the table and have the student show you?
Because I find that when you place an object down, you can no longer manipulate through it. You can't delete things. You can't put things that weren't there before. And so having it on the table makes it transparent for us to see.
Okay, and do you personally lay eyes on the offending social media posts?
I do.
And why is that?
Because if I don't see it, then I don't know that it's there. So if a student, for example, and we've had this before where they take screenshots, the problem I have with taking a screenshot is that I can take a screenshot of the bad stuff somebody else said and leave off all the bad stuff that I say. And so I want to see from the beginning, where did this start? Like, is this something did this start at school? Was it something that you had somewhere else? Was it something that was misinterpreted in the text that was sent? And by text, I mean like the actual letters. Was it have a good day or was it have a good day? It depends on how it's worded and how and what emojis are being used, what other pictures or things like that. So I like to see from the beginning of conversations, and we scroll through all of those to get to, okay, this is the story that I see developing in this.
What sort of misbehavior have you seen on social media platforms at your school?
A lot. So I have seen clearly students who are bullying each other, cyberbullying, if you will. So students making threats to other students. And whether that's when I see you, they say it's on site, which means when I see you, I'm going to fight you. Students who threaten another student with a weapon. And I have seen that with an actual weapon being shown, as well as just saying that they're gonna, I'm gonna get you when I have my gun, I'll come to your house or things like that. I've seen, so a lot of that's around fighting and that kind of violence. I have also seen, comments or social media, so we'll call it posts, but more like private messages, that implicate, sexual, I'm trying to think of the word, exploitation, when you take a picture of yourself and you send it to somebody else, or they've taken a picture of themselves and send it to you. So I've seen that inappropriate. Those are the things I can think of at this moment.
And what social media platforms do you typically find these types of misbehaviors on?
Most on Instagram and Snapchat.
Facebook?
I have seen one for Facebook, but that's not typical for our students. It's more of that's an older generation thing. But we do have a few students, and we did have one who was posting inappropriate pictures of herself on Facebook.
Would you tell the jury about what you've seen with regard to social media and fighting at Wilson?
So, when I started as restorative justice coach, one of the things that I saw was, students came and showed me, this is a video that somebody took of me fighting. I don't want it up there. And, students will create, I'll call it a page, if you will. They create an account, and they'll call it Wilson Fights. And there's any school that is out there in the country has these pages that have been created. And each year, so some of them take them down. The students get older. They move to high school. They create the high school one, and they no longer run the middle school one. So somebody else then creates a new middle school one. And on those, they post the fights that are happening on campus. And so this is ongoing. Or they create an account, and it's, of teachers they don't like, or another account with girls they don't like, or boys they don't like, or so we have a lot of things like that pop up on mostly on Instagram.
You mentioned weapons somewhat and threats. How about drugs? Have you seen drug-related postings?
Yes. So,
Your Honor, may we approach briefly, actually?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Salazar, in your role, have you, as assistant principal and as the restorative justice person, have you also seen postings on social media regarding drug use by students at Wilson?
I have.
Tell me about those.
So I have seen some of our students with a vape, whether it's a nicotine vape or a THC disposable, but they have it in their hand and it's at their mouth. And then the next picture is they've moved it away and there's smoke coming out. So I've seen that a few times. I've also seen the video of things like that. I have seen students drinking alcohol while driving a car.
And let me interrupt real quick.
Yes.
Are those postings that you've personally seen on students' social media accounts?
Yes, they are personally seen on their social media accounts.
So the one where they're drinking and driving a car, do you know the age of the students involved in that post?
Those were 8th graders, so 13 or 14.
Okay. And how about the vaping students?
That's everybody. So that's from 6th grade to 8th grade. So from 11 years old to 14.
And they're posting that on social media accounts?
They are posting it on their accounts.
Well, how do they get the social media account if you know?
So sometimes it's because we are doing a search for something different, and that's what we come across. That's usually when I see it. It's not like somebody's coming to me and saying, "Oh, so and so was smoking. Look." They don't do that. That's snitching, and that's not a good thing. But what they will do is they will. Somebody will say, "I'm doing an investigation about something else," like a child is threatening somebody that they're going to fight them. And so I asked them to bring in their phone, and so they bring in the phone, and we're scrolling through their Instagram account, and there's images of this child who's using some form of a drug. And then, of course, now we're calling families and saying, "Hey, there's this picture. You should come and see this."
So my questions, I think, have been a little bit imprecise. So let me be a little more precise. Are these situations where you've seen drugs and these people driving and drinking, was that on Instagram specifically?
Instagram specifically.
What about sexual exploitation? What have you seen in that regard on Instagram specifically?
Excuse me. So I have a student last year who was on Instagram. I'd taken her phone away because she's on the phone too much. You're not allowed to be on the phone in our school. We made it's now state like rule or something, and APS now has it as a requirement that phones are not to be seen. But our school did that a few years ago when I started off as a restorative practicing coach. And what we found was that students were constantly on their phones in the classroom and things like that. So our staff created a no visibility rule, so they needed to be in the backpack and turned off. Well, this child was choosing to not have hers turned off. And so I took her phone away. After I took her phone away, she borrowed somebody else's phone. And when she borrowed that other person's phone, she signed into her Instagram account and used that person's phone.
And let me interrupt you again. Do you know the ages of these two students at that time?
They're 7th graders, so that would be 12 and 13.
Okay, thank you.
So the girl that her phone was being used, she and her friend came to me in the cafeteria and asked if they could meet me in private. And so I went with her and her friend to just a room across the way, and they shared with me that the girl that had borrowed the phone had left the Instagram account open. And if you're a teenage girl, or maybe any of us, you saw that, oh, her Instagram thing is open. I'm going to see what's going on here. And so was scrolling through that girl's recent account or recent conversation with a male. And based on the things that were stated, it was information like gathering information. This is my boyfriend, and he is asking for pictures of this person. And so they shared all of that with me. So I'm looking at the phone and I'm looking at all this information. I took it to my office and continued to look through it. With the child present, a child whose phone it was, asked those children, did you see any pictures? And they said, not any, there wasn't anything naked that they saw, but they knew that she had done it. And you could tell that she had done it based on the descriptions that were given. The pictures themselves were, I don't know, erased or deleted, but they weren't there. But underneath was things like, the person saying, show me your tatas. And the girl saying, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. No, just show them to me. I love you. And we're, this is a good thing. And then so the next thing is, oh, they're so beautiful. I want to put my mouth on them. And then, I love you. I love you. Who's that person? Take a picture of your classroom. They take a picture and so now you see the picture in the classroom and there's one of our students is sitting there and the person says, who's that boy that's sitting next to you? I don't want you sitting by him. The girl says, answers back, well, that's where my assigned seat is. I don't talk to him at all. No, I don't want you sitting there anymore. This child stopped going to class, so we were always finding this person in the bathroom.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, she didn't.
I'm sorry, objection, Your Honor. This testimony is hearsay. We would object to it. And the questions on this.
Your Honor, I believe she found her in the bathroom. So that would be something she saw.
Yes, on that basis, overruled.
So, she didn't go to class. She would stay in the bathroom. She had a chair that she brought in from the hallway and put it into the back stall, and we would go in, and I moved out the chair. I moved the chair so it couldn't be brought in again, so it's nowhere near where she could do that. The other students refer to it as her office. So she basically hung out in the bathroom, and it's actually where she was when I found her on her phone. I walked in and she was on her phone. I said, let me take you to class and let me have your phone.
For how long was the student not attending classes?
I couldn't tell you. It was a while.
What happened next? Did it escalate?
So, in the text or the chat or whatever they call it, the messages that were being sent back and forth, this person, was asking, well, now send me pictures of your kitty. So I thought that meant, your private areas, your female areas. And the girl kept saying, no, I'm not ready for that. I want to do that. And it was just a continual pressure. I want to see your kitty. I want to see how pretty it is. And so, eventually you get a image deleted or something like that. And then underneath that, it says, now take off the emojis. I want to see it in its full beauty. And so, again, you have that same sort of pushback by the girl and the same, well, I still want to be your boyfriend, but I don't know if I want to be your boyfriend if you can't show me. And so, she, must have sent, because then the next message down is, oh man, it's so beautiful. I just want to be inside you. And so these were, comments that were made, and then suddenly it abruptly stops. And so, that abrupt stopped was, then the next day I'm getting the phone in front of me so I can see what was going on. I called in the parent of the child. I shared with her that this is something that's happening. Again, children change their names. It's not their name on Instagram. It's, whatever name they have created.
What do you mean by that, Ms. Salazar?
So you can call yourself anything, right? So you can, I don't know, I'm looking around, I see green and gray and blue, GJB. I'm a GJB kid. So you've just created a username for yourself.
Okay, so then you have to go try and figure out who these
Yeah,
people are.
who is this, right? The child claimed that wasn't her. Again, I'm asking who borrowed your phone. Well, this is the girl who borrowed my phone. Okay, and she's logged in on her account. Yes, she is. So the mom wasn't sure that she believed that this was her child. She was upset, but she thought, no, it's not my kid. And her daughter said it wasn't me.
And what happened next?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, these are all out-of-court statements. Truth of the matter that underage users are using Instagram. We object on hearsay grounds.
Your Honor, I'm asking, it's not for the truth that matter asserted, it's showing the effect on the listener and what she did to investigate and what the outcome of this investigation was.
And overruled.
Thank you.
Can you ask your question again?
Maybe. So what happened next in your investigation?
So I took my own screenshots so I could have them and write up my report for everything. We did I talked to, of course, the principal about it, and our counselor, just so we could sort of, what is our plan here? What do we need to do? We did, there was a safety plan created for the child so that we made sure that she's not, one, her phone is not with her, and two, that she is not in the bathroom by herself, that that was a lot of work. But not long after that, this child and her friend, I was in a classroom, because I'm the assistant principal, one of my other jobs is to enroll people for the next school year. And so I was in classrooms, specifically social studies classes, and I'm asking students to go onto their computer and register for next year. Select the classes, the electives that you want to take. This child was in there with her friend, and rather than being and doing the work that we were doing on computers, the friend was on her phone and had passed her phone to her friend. And so I see it because that's just who I am as a person. I kind of see, I can see who's on their phone here right now. And so she passed this to her friend who's not supposed to have a phone on campus. So I walked over and she gave her phone back to her friend, and through the biggest 7th grade tantrum, that's when you're, screaming and yelling, leave me alone, don't touch me, get away from me, that kind of thing. I said, I just want your phone. Most of the time because I'm an assistant principal, when I go and ask for a phone, people are like, oh, and then they hand it to me. It's not really a big deal. In this case, it was a huge deal, which made me wonder, okay, what's going on here? I had to call up security. I had to release all the other students out of the classroom. And so, the bell rang for lunch anyway. And so, the child kept screaming, I just want my mom. So we called her mom. Said, okay, can you come in? And so the mom is on speakerphone and said, give her your phone. So eventually, I now have the child's phone. We're in my office. Mom comes in to get the phone and we have a conversation about what had happened. And, keep in mind that I had seen the first phone that had the whatever username of the male or the person who was asking for the naked pictures of the other student.
Did you ever identify the male?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever identify the male?
I did not. And so that person's name was up there. And so I asked the mom, I said, it's weird that your child was throwing this tantrum. It feels like there's something more going on. Would you mind opening your phone? Her phone. And she did. So she opened the phone. It opened up to Instagram and it was back to that same, there's a group conversation, and I recognized the name of the male or the person who was asking or soliciting from my student, the other student. And so I asked questions about that. How does your daughter know this person? What I found was that it's convoluted. The child who was screaming, her boyfriend was friends with the boy or introduced that person to the girl who was sending pictures. I turned all of that over to our APS police, and again called in the victim's mom. I let her know what was going on. The police met with the mom. We met together actually, and then the mom ended up, the girl confessed, yes, it was her. Yes, she did send pictures to this person. He's her boyfriend, but she's never actually met him in person.
And all of this was over Instagram?
All of this was Instagram.
Over what period of time, if you would know?
Maybe February through April. Yeah. Eventually the mom ended up getting jumped by a group of young people, and you're disenrolling her child, and that's it. I don't know what happened after any of that.
Did you investigate any other situations where there was sexual exploitation over Instagram?
Yes, I was, excuse me. I was present in the investigation of a child, a sixth grader, so she was about 11 as the beginning of the school year. A student had come to me and said that one of our other students was being catfished. I had no idea what she meant. And so it's a new term. So catfishing is when I say that I'm somebody that I'm not. So that's, you have to use social media to do this. I say that I'm this boy who likes you. And so you think I'm this boy who likes you. It's maybe a boy from the campus. And we have conversations, but it's just me. I'm the one who's doing it. It's not really the boy. And in that catfishing, you are then asking that person to send you images of yourself, whatever that might be.
And did you see these notes between the catfisher and the catfishee?
So I pulled in the child with our counselor. Our counselor and our head principal and myself were in the room. The counselor and the head principal looked through her phone. I chose not to look through the phone, so I didn't see any of those images myself. I was in the room and present and heard the conversations around it, but I did not see any of them.
Have you heard the discussions about what was on the phone?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, this is the last time. Objection to hearsay for the reasons stated. Thank you.
If I could ask the next question, which would be, did that form the basis of your investigation and your